Hello everyone and welcome to this week's live stream. I'll be your host today, Mod Aiza, and joining me this week are Mods Kirby.
Hello.
Hello, Mod Bruno.
Hey.
And lastly, Mod Tide.
Hello there.
Hello. How's everyone doing today? Let's start with you, Kirby. What have you been up to this week? Anything interesting you can share with us?
Yeah, I've been finishing off the work that was intended to be finished off this week with PvP Arena. Unfortunately, due to something you'll probably have to mention at some point, that's probably not going to be the case, but I've been working on the Spectator UI. I need to get it plugged in, but I'm actually really happy with where it's landed. Might actually see if I can get it plugged in tomorrow so I can get a preview out on Twitter, just so I can share it, because I'm actually I've made something and I'm proud of it for once in my life. This is a rare occurrence.
All right, you're definitely going to have to share it on Twitter now you've said that. We'll
when it's plugged in.
Old retweet. Yeah, okay, maybe when it's plugged in and working, that would probably be better.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kirby. How about yourself, Bruno? How are you doing today and what have you been up to?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. Today's a good day. Also today, I joined a new team, so I'll be working on the enhanced client team, which is very cool, with Mod Tide. Happy to be back on a team with him. Yeah, good stuff.
Awesome, thank you, Bruno. And yourself, Mod Tide, how are you doing? What have you been up to?
I'm doing pretty good. Been hard at work fixing bugs for the enhanced client, as well as we're working on new features for the in client as well.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, everyone. That is great to hear. So obviously this week it is a general Q&A, but we do have some, I'd say a few questions that are dedicated to the recent PvP Arena rewards blog, which we'll go over, and then we've got the generic questions which we've gathered from yourself, so thank you for posting those. Before that though, we've got a few announcements that we want to go over. And first of all, ! game update. So in this week's game update, we had some quality of life changes to Guardians of the Rift, as well as Beneath Cursed Sands, and a few more pieces. You can find out all the details in that weekly game update blog with ! game update. I'm running out of breath because I ran up the stairs very quickly before I came on the stream and I'm terribly unfit. Sorry for that. The next one is ! PvP Arena. So basically, yeah, we're diving into the results of our most recent poll for the PvP Arena. If you've seen, you'll most likely have noticed that most of the rewards, well, all of the rewards in fact failed, apart from the Beneath Cursed Sands question. So if you want to take a look at our thoughts on the future of PvP and old school, let us know what you think. ! PvP Arena is the place to go. This one's a little bit more of an information update. If you've seen it on socials, great. If not, ! DMM. Essentially, whilst we were preparing to get the Deadman Mode Reborn rerun closed beta, bit of a mouthful there, prepared, ready for tomorrow, unfortunately, we encountered some difficulties with the player save profiles. For those of you that aren't familiar, essentially what we're planning to do is make it so that the stats and gear that players had during Deadman Reborn 1v1s last year will be the same stats and gear, etc., that they'll be able to use in the beta and then the official rerun when we get to it. But due to issues with the way that those save profiles were kind of populating, it was recommended that we delay until it's been resolved. So we're working hard to get that fixed, and we're confident that the new date will now be next Friday instead of this Friday. So apologies, of course, for the delay. Not ideal, but more ideal than us going into it and players not having the right stats and gear. So that's that. And then last but not least, ! Giants Foundry. Something new for you here. Following your feedback, we've made some changes for Giants Foundry ahead of a poll going live. So if you want to get all the latest, including the estimated experience rates, new rewards, and a first look at some imagery from inside the Foundry, ! Giants Foundry is everything that you need for that. Now, let's have a look at some art from the community. First up, we have this image from Susie Owl, which is a lo-fi RuneScape moment. Very cool. There's so much detail. Like, it's one of those, the more you look, the more you see. It's
so many books.
Books, stickers, words, plushes. I love it.
You know, they're wasting their XP lamp there. We'll use that.
Maybe they're saving it up for a milestone to hit. All right, next one comes in from Nick. No, I can't say your name. I'm sorry, it's too many letters. But this is RuneScape themed wallets from Nitropism. Yep, someone help me out in that sense. But these are cool. They look like the handmade leather wallets. Really awesome. I
Yeah.
like the crafting one.
That dragon one was
I
quite
like the
nice. I
dragon
like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Side nose.
Sweet. All right. Let's go on to the next one from Trillion Studios. I can actually say that name, and this is titled The Maiden.
Looks awesome.
Pretty
I'm a big fan of like
awesome
the 3D
3D
renders
render.
that people are starting to make.
Imagine,
and it
right?
just
Imagine
don't
that's a
seem to be
statue.
stopping. Well, don't give the merch team ideas. May compete against the pins. I would love to see that though. Some RuneScape minis. It would be really cool to see them coming to light. All right, this
Absolutely.
next one comes from IGN Draw. Sorry for cutting you off there, Tide. My bad. I'm just so excited. This is. Oh, am I looking at the wrong one? Maybe this is PBRD7, the Barrows Brother render. I think we're meant to see Skillcape keyrings, but the title is Torag the Corrupted, so there may be an issue on my script. So let's just say this is from IGN Draw, and it is Torag the Corrupted. I just realised I just said Torag, because that's how I normally say it instead of Torag. So I'm sure there's going to be some comments in chat about that. Old habits die hard.
Now the question
What
is,
is going
if
on
he
in the
hits
top
someone
right-hand
with those
corner?
hammers, does he only get one hit?
Ooh. You're asking the real questions. Don't, because you know what's going to happen next. You're going to get the question come up in next week's Q&A. Can we buff the Torex hammers to allow them to double hit? And then we'll have to talk about like how, yeah, we think that's a really good idea, but there's maybe other things we should prioritize.
Also, you only hit
So
once
the
with
cookie
claws, right?
crumbles.
But Mod Aiza, all you have to do is halve the damage and double the attacks. It can't be that hard.
Well, you know what, Bruno? I'm glad you said that because you work in QA, so I'm going to leave that one down to you to look at.
We'll get to a
very
similar
much.
question. We'll get to a similar question like that later.
Yeah, and you'll be like, I don't know, really difficult actually.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. All right, let's go on to the last one, which I'll wait for the image to come up just in case the text is wrong for me. Ah, there we go. These are the Barrows Brother renders in full 3D glory. I'm quiet because I'm looking at them all. I've not seen this before.
Yeah. That's the part where I try to remember which brother's which. Arim is the mage one?
Yeah.
Yes,
I'm
that's
getting
right.
lots of production.
Mhm.
Good. Looks really cool. Love it.
Does look cool. The Guthern Spear's throwing me off a little bit. It looks a little bit too horny. As in animal horns.
Yeah, please use different words in the
Mm.
future. For the sake of the internet,
Yeah.
Bruno is... there we go.
He's back. Oh,
I'm
here
back.
we go. This is chat not knowing how to grow up.
Yeah.
All right. So before I embarrass myself any further, let's move on to some questions, shall we? So these are mostly related to PvP, and the first one comes in from Creatron, and they have asked if we can explain how the requirements work. It says 20 wilderness kills or an LMS win. According to my collection log, I've only played 8 games of LMS with 3 kills and 0 wins, and I don't think I've even killed a single person in the wilderness, but I was able to vote on all the questions. So I'll pick this one up. I had a chat with some of the devs that helped work on this, and we believe that essentially I pretty much just got the details wrong in the blog, so apologies on my behalf, where it says 1 LMS win. So the criteria basically was 20 kills on PvP worlds or within the wilderness, and that also includes Bounty Hunter as well, I believe, or 1 LMS win. That 1 LMS win was actually that you just had to have participated in an LMS game. So if you'd done LMS, you were more than likely able to be able to vote, and that's probably how you managed to get in on the vote there, Creatron. In the actual PvP arena rewards summary blog, we go into a little bit of detail as to why we looked at restricting and why we were quite lax as well on the restrictions. So I'd recommend checking that out for a little bit more info, save me going over it now. But hopefully that answers your question. The
Just to say as
next one
well,
comes in... Oh, sorry, Kirby.
I'm not particularly bothered.
Second
I
one.
just keep getting doxed on these streams, man. Just to add to that, I'm not particularly worried about the fact that we got the criteria wrong, because from the looks of the data that it's conveniently also presented in the blog, most of the rewards would have failed anyway, even if we got the restrictions tighter. So it's something we could take as a learning point going forwards, in that maybe we can restrict tighter, maybe we can restrict looser, but either way, these rewards were not there.
yeah, I mean it had an impact, but it still wouldn't have been enough of an impact to have really been the ultimate cause of the rewards failing, which is why we're looking at reworking them. But there's some questions on that a little bit later on that we'll get to. But thanks for that, Kobe. Really good clarification. The next question comes in from OSRS player. Very fitting. There were changes made to these rewards based on community feedback prior to polling, and they still failed the poll. Will you adjust how feedback is collected and used for changes made to these rewards? Almost feels like this question was placed here intentionally, but I don't believe it was. But the answer is yes. In that same blog that we just mentioned a moment ago, we talked about a PvP feedback Discord that we've set up. That is now live, so check the blog out by doing ! PvP Arena, I believe the command was, and you'll see a link to be able to join that. Anyone is able to join that server in read-only, but we have restricted contributing to discussion to a select few members that filled out the survey when we first said we were going to do feedback. Essentially, what we're going to be doing from here on out over the course of the next few weeks is looking at if there are ways that we can either, one, rework the current rewards that we have and their set effects and their stats so that they're a little bit more favorable by everyone, or two, basically looking at are there any alternative ideas for rewards that may utilize armor slots that we've already got some assets for, that would also be fitting. The way that we're going to handle that is by initially gathering the suggestions from the PvP feedback Discord, and then we'll create a blog based off what's discussed within there, and then share that to the wider player base as we would with any other blog. It's essentially what we're looking at doing is just having an extra step of validation for PvP specifically. We are pretty good, I feel, when it comes to things such as skilling and PVM and quests. They're all very well established within the community. We know exactly who we want to be looking at if we want very specific and focused feedback. It's not so easy for PvP. There's so many communities within there, so many different opinions. So we're going to use that as a way to essentially validate any changes that we make, similar to how we would internally, and then post out a blog, go through the normal feedback process of gathering feedback from the wider community. We'll then probably talk about that feedback again within the feedback Discord that we've got focused around PvP before we look at repolling. But that's essentially how we're going to be looking at adjusting the way that we collect feedback for PvP stuff and these rewards specifically. So not so much about, we're really precious over the rewards that are there. We put out what we thought, a section of PvPers wanted. So we're not quote unquote trying to force the rewards to come back in. It's just that we have them there. There's an area that we can talk about. So if we're able to rework them, great. If not, then we'll just make new rewards.
I would like to force the art in, though, because the art for the armors is, really nice in-game. I want the models to be used, damn it.
And this is one of the, it's one of the things that happens, right, with the way that we handle content and the fact that we've got the poll system. Historically, people have wanted to have an idea and a feel for what the armors or weapons might look like before they're added into the game and before they're voted on. But that does come with a risk that if it was to fail, then it might have been time spent on something that won't make it. But we have that now, at least. So in the future, if we ever look at armors and such, we've got those to fall back on. Anything else on that, or shall I move on? Sweet. All right. So from Barking Dogs, they have asked if the arena can still be released and have the completed rewards come out separately. This would at least allow for people to play the arena and give adequate feedback on the initial launch as you guys are updating the rewards.
I mean, theoretically, we could just remove the shop in its entirety, and that would probably just work. Might turn off reward points as well, but that's also a thing we can reasonably do. So,
I'd probably
if everything fails, yeah, sure, we could still release it, but the problem then is there much point in doing it if there's no payout? There's something we've been discussing internally as well, and having this PvP arena with its ranking system is nice, but is there an intrinsic reason to play it, and does that maintain a player base for long enough that people are around to play it? Because there is a sort of dead game effect where if players don't think they're going to get a game, they won't queue for the game, so the population continually decreases, and it just sort of dies a slow and pitiful death, which I'm hoping we're going to avoid, but it's something that's worrying me at least.
Tide, you were going to say something in between Kobe's chat. Is that still relevant, or?
All I was going to say was I'd probably still let them get their points, because you are going to have the rewards eventually, and you don't want to have people play it all this time and then they haven't got anything to show for it.
Yeah, if we were going to do that, I think it's obviously a discussion point to have. I'm kind of like more in favour of what you've said there, Tide, actually. You can still gain your reward points to spend on them at some point, but at the same time, there'd be no point having reward points if there weren't any rewards that were coming out, like, period. So, yeah. I guess one thing that I can say on this, though, is that the arena itself is something that we said from the start we wouldn't be polling. So the PvP arena will come out, even if there aren't any rewards for it. And if we do get to that point where we can't rework them and find anything that's suitable to be added to it, then we may well be in a position where the arena does come out without any rewards that, at least initially, we might spend some more time looking at adding some in the future based off feedback and stuff. But yeah, the arena itself will be coming regardless, as the replacement to the dual arena. Change a Life Today has asked if the high barrier to entry of making some sort of PvP account has been brought up before as something that deters people from wanting to get into PvP. Oh, actually, yeah, okay. I should have started this off differently, but anyway. However, adding equipment that can be only used in PvP serves to fracture the game and gives the perception that PvP is a separate game mode. Do you believe that the correct approach involves separating the reward structure of the two communities? Or do you think it will worsen the predator/prey problem? Because anyone that's killed in wildy bosses or something non-PK is unable to use the new best in slot or near best in slot equipment that their stacker is likely to be wearing. I assume by stacker they mean that their killer is likely to be wearing. Yeah. So I guess in essence, it's kind of like asking how do we feel about what the correct approach is with PvP gear. Should they be separate in PvP and non-PvP, or should it be so that they can be used everywhere?
I mean, it's kind of hard because any item that's good in PvP is likely to be good in not PvP as well. So if you want an item to be good, but just like good for PvPers with the lower restrictions to like get more access into PvP, you do kind of need to limit it. To the last point, there is technically nothing stopping you from bringing the PvP only equipment as a switch, although I understand that is inventory spaces that you're then bringing to not fight the bosses or whatever it is you're doing in the wilderness, so that's a really awkward one. It's such a hard problem to solve.
One of the ideas I came up with was we have normal stats, but for stuff we want to add to PvP, we could have a separate stats, like PvP stats. So if you're in a PvP zone, for instance, we'll use those stats instead. So then we could balance it around. We wouldn't have to worry about PvE.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think historically the problem with that... Oh, sorry, Kobe.
The problem is that it then sort of builds up into this same sort of situation where PvP does sort of like feel as exists as a separate entity to PvM and the rest of the game, which, yeah.
Yeah, I think as well, historically, we've had a problem with showing like how stats are different in different zones. The interface for, you know, gear equipment as it stands isn't great, in all honesty. My take on this, though, is honestly, I really, really dislike the fact that gear works differently in PvP and non-PvP. And my preference would be that we would avoid it entirely, and items would just be items that can be used. And if they have benefit in PvP, great. And if they just so happen to have benefit in PvM as well, then also great. But the problem with that is you've then suddenly got items coming from an area of a game mode that, quite frankly, a large portion of the player base don't really want to engage in, which brings forward that discussion point of feeling forced, quote unquote forced. It is a choice, by the way, when you enter the wilderness. That choice is agreed upon when you step over the ditch or accept the warning on a teleport. But that's besides the point. That sentiment is still there. So the whole having items that are very specific to PvP is essentially our answer to that problem. You know, if they don't have a use outside of PvP and you're not interested in PvP, then there really is no reason that you would feel forced into having to get those items. It's not a great system. As I said, I'd rather that we didn't have to approach it that way. But in all honesty, from all of the like negativity that we see around certain items that are only obtainable from the wilderness that have uses outside of it, I don't really see another viable option for us to kind of like have. So I wouldn't say I see them as separate game modes. They're just very different communities with different opinions on what should and shouldn't happen, and we have to just try and accommodate that as best as we can. So, yeah. I see why it says OSRS player now. Some people have had their names redacted. Another OSRS player has said, it seems that players don't like the idea of restricted polls. Will this change? You might consider polling in the future. I think that's might say, will this change how you might consider polling in the future? All right. I mean, I may as well cover another one because it's very CM orientated, and if anyone else wants to add in afterwards, feel free. All right, I'll say something that's probably going to get some backlash in the chat, but to me, it seems that players don't like the idea of restricted polls when it doesn't suit them, because we've done restricted polls in the past for Iron Men, Group Iron Men, Ultimate Iron Men, and there's never been any negativity towards that. It's always been seen as, oh, it's really nice that you're considering that community. It's really nice that, you know, you're looking to give them that extra support. And whilst the PvP Arena Rewards one was a massive jump up in terms of how much we'd restricted it and how many questions you could vote on, and that was, you know, admittedly something that we should have spoke about in more detail before we did it. Even that aside, this is the only time now that we've done it where we've seen some form of backlash where people have wanted to have their say. I understand why as well. Like, at the end of the day, if you're someone who's in the wilderness, frequenting in there, and you've got someone who is attacking you, you might rightly and fairly want to be able to have a say on whether or not armors that help them kill you faster should be added into the game or not. But that whole basis is really only around the whole, I don't want to say spite voting side of things, but really you are just saying you want to vote no because you don't want that person to have a better timing game because it makes your timing game not as good. So it's like, how do we really combat that situation other than looking at doing restricted polling? Because you're never going to want to vote for something that will potentially make your experience in the game worse than it is. But the only reason that mentality, in my opinion anyway, exists is because of this mindset of, I feel like I have to go to the wilderness. And when I'm in the wilderness, I don't want to be spending my time there. I want to get out as quickly as possible. But if that mentality shifted somewhat where, you know, you accepted the risk that you take when you go in there, you accepted that it's really the only area left in the entire game where you can't predict everything. You can't go in there fully set up in maximum efficiency, where you know exactly what's going to happen, you know how long you're going to be able to stay there for, when you're going to have to go to the bank, and how long it takes you to get back, and what exact rates you're going to get. It's unpredictable, and that's got quite a lot of charm to it, which is something that we're trying to, you know, obviously protect and keep in the game, because it is so unique to old school. So yeah, a lot of players didn't like the idea of restricted polling. Will it change how we might consider it in the future? Absolutely. But will it stop us from doing it going forward? I don't think so. It's very much was an experiment, and I think it will continue to be experimental for us. There's nothing to say that we won't look at doing restricted polling in the future for things like PVM or skilling. Should the questions warrant that level of restriction, for example. It's just so happens to be we had something very ready for PvP at the time, so that was the first one that got it. So, yeah. No more takes. All right.
You said everything. Good job.
Thanks. We have a couple more. There's like 6 more PvP related questions, and then we have some standard ones, so I'll try and get through them quickly. V Campbell 4 has asked what the current status of the Wilderness boss rework is. We've heard no information since the Summer Summit on it, and the roadmap had it coming out in June/July.
I'll play this one flat. It got pushed back last year because it was supposed to be me and Flippy primarily working on it, and between League's work, and then Flippy left the company, which is entirely reasonable, but it also meant that we didn't really have enough manpower to work on it, so it got pushed.
It's fault.
Everyone at Flippy on Twitter, please don't.
No,
Please
don't.
don't.
No.
Only I am nice things.
Don't do that.
Only I am nice things. He deserves it.
Flippy, tell him to have a nice day.
At him and thank him for kicking the project off, so that it's in the
Yes.
roadmap now.
Yeah, it's just a quick question of then, like, we need to find a space to work on it, which is hopefully soon, because I have a meeting about it tomorrow. But yeah.
That's all I was going to add as well, is that we have a kickoff meeting for the Wilderness boss rework tomorrow. There is a design that we had from back when Flippy was still working at Jagex. We worked on it with him, or at least I remember working on it myself.
Yeah,
and,
I was working on it with him,
helped
yeah.
out a lot.
Oh yeah, you
Kirby
too.
Involved too. So there's definitely something there, which is why it's in the roadmap. But PvP Arena is still the current focus, and until PvP Arena's done, we're not moving over into the Wilderness boss rework. Still there. We just got to get to it. So hopefully in, I don't want to say the next couple of weeks, but within the next like month or so, I imagine that we'll have some form of design to be able to share with you and let you know what our plans are. I think we've already talked about how we want to look at moving the dragon pickaxe, or sorry, not moving it, but making it so that you can get the dragon pickaxe from outside of the wilderness when we do the boss rework. And the main reason behind that, there are two really. One of them is it's very much a sticking point within the community still. It's one of those last few items that players feel quote unquote forced into getting. So if we can help alleviate that without actually taking anything away from the wilderness, then great. The second reason being that is that we're not looking to take anything away, right? We're reworking these bosses. And if the design that we have at the moment is anything to go off, there's some pretty awesome rewards. I don't want to leak too much, but we're looking at a variety of different things. I literally don't think anyone is going to ever care about the dragon pickaxe not being available in the wilderness anymore, apart from those that want to get it from outside of the wilderness when you see those. So it's just swapping something, and it seems like a great opportunity for us to kind of do that.
Well, I will say those rewards, based on the current poll results, I am not feeling too confident in the current moment.
Hey, look, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Okay. For now, let's just imagine a world where all these cool ideas come to life. I know there's one reward for sure that I think most people will really like, and I'll remain hopeful.
Yeah.
He knows.
He knows.
LJMT has asked, and we've had this said many times beforehand, so we'll be careful for all those merchers out there. Can we please pull a buff to Thamron's Scepter, the laughing stock of the wilderness weapons? It's been suggested 20 plus times with significant upvotes, but never addressed by the team. Has been addressed in Q&A.
Yeah, I'm going to say we've probably addressed it 20 plus times. So I know I for sure have addressed it at least a handful of times in my time at Jagex. I guess I'll try and take this one. We know the Thamron Scepter isn't the best weapon, especially compared to the other wilderness weapons. And the thing about buffing it is, how do we go about buffing it? Because we have to make sure that it doesn't make other weapons kind of useless and still has a good use in the wilderness, which is a little bit of a hard thing to balance. And also, we're not overly happy about people merching them like they are, well, like they might be trying to do so here. So, you know, the players themselves are also not huge fans of that. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I think it's like we know it needs a rework, we know it needs addressing. It's just fitting it in. Well, that just so happens to be a boss rework coming up soon. Maybe we can look at addressing it.
No, we're not doing it then, because if we tell you we're going to do it then, they'll start merching. We're not doing it.
No, I said maybe. I said maybe. So then if you're foolish enough to go and invest into them now and then find that you're buying them at a high price because everyone else is doing that's watching the stream, you're then going to wait a few weeks, maybe even a few months, and be like, damn, I really shouldn't have done that. I need to get the cash. So you're going to liquidate your Thamron Scepters. You're going to lose half your gold. And that's what gambling does to you. So gamble safe.
And also to anyone suggesting make it best in Saw in the Wilderness, does it really make sense to make it best in Saw compared to something like not a harmonized Nightmare Staff? Because that's pretty damn expensive, and it definitely should be better than a Thamron Scepter. Which is we kind of asked the balancing of like, how do we go about balancing this without making the other items, which are supposedly meant to be better than it, not as good at it.
Well, don't tell Bruno. We have a few ideas, but we need to go through them, and not on this stream.
Yeah,
but we have definitely addressed it before. It's just not been something that we've put to paper and committed to fully. But keep an eye on news in the future. All right, Durain has said, People keep complaining about the wilderness being dead. Why not move risk fights and PKing that exist in PvP worlds back into the wilderness by removing PvP worlds?
I mean, all that's going to happen if we do that is people are going to have their risk fights like next to the Ferox Enclave, and as soon as someone else shows up, they just go, "Oh, no, we're going back inside now." Like, the problem is wilderness kind of needs to be dead, because if the wilderness was a hotbed for PKers, all that would happen is no one would go there because it's full of PKers. Why would you go train your prayer at the Chaos Altar? Because you're just going to get PK'd for all of your bones. It's sort of like, it's this weird like pseudo state of it needs to have a low population for it to work. To have a population, it's yeah. But removing
I'm not sure
PvP
you're
worlds,
going to
I
get
don't
many
think...
favourable responses to that take, Kirby.
oh, like it's the wilderness is bizarre, and I don't really understand it mechanically. I understand mechanically, but I don't know if it's good.
It has a very interesting ecosystem, right? That
Yeah.
It's very delicate in that sense. In terms of like moving though PvP worlds, this is something that we have talked about before, I know, but the thing is they've got quite an established like base of players now that frequent PvP worlds, and having people accustomed to that, removing it, I think would be a bit detrimental, and could also be seen very similar to Bounty Hunter, which we removed without really putting in a suitable replacement. So it currently serves a purpose. I think what I would rather see us spend our time on is bringing back Bounty Hunter so that Edgeville becomes populated again, and then those that still want to play on PvP worlds can. What I imagine will happen is that if we brought Bounty Hunter back, PvP worlds would just slowly die off anyway, as people prefer to go over to Bounty Hunter for whatever extra rewards you might be able to get from there, and then we could consider potentially closing them based on activity. But right now, in its current format, I think it would be too risky to remove them and expect everyone to start fighting in the wilderness again. Especially when the player base is as small as it is. I think the bracketing on PvP worlds helps you get fights more consistently, because you have the option to be able to fight someone, you know, plus or minus 10 or so levels within your range at just outside of a bank, as opposed to having to go 10 levels deep in the wilderness. So we would need to see some growth first before I think we could look at changing that personally.
On the topic of PvP worlds, what do you reckon it would be like if you could only enter the wilderness in specific worlds, so limiting the access?
That's also something that we've talked about before. I think the original Wilderness Changes blog, we said that we were going to look at limiting which worlds you could access the wilderness on. It's one of the most popular suggestions from those that frequent the wilderness anyway, looking for players to kill, just because of how many worlds there are that you're required to hop around. I wouldn't say that we've completely ruled it out, but the feedback that we had when we first pitched that in the Wilderness Changes was overwhelmingly negative, to the point where it probably would be a detriment for us to do that straight away. But who knows, with like different rewards in mind, with maybe a little bit more of an ability for people to be able to fight back and incentives further for you to go into the wilderness, so it really feels like it's worth your time every time you're there, even if you get PK'd, we could consider something like that. And I think that's what it would have to take before we looked at restricting the worlds, is giving you a really damn good reason to go there, knowing that you're going to get killed whilst you're there, and that being okay, because it's not really going to change anything for you and what your goals were that you were trying to hit. But in its current status, I think it would just alienate a lot of players that are already feeling quite negative towards PKing generally. All right, so Mr. G has said, are there any plans to design any new wilderness bosses that aren't in multi-combat? It would be nice to try something new, but without the risk that a team could jump me. I don't mind the solo PK interruptions.
This was something that is something that is being considered, because we're still looking at the design again, because we have this to do that. I know there's some discussion about, could we do this? What would it look like if we were to move the existing bosses around into singles or multi, or how we could play around with the brackets and give each boss a different experience. We have options available to us. Just do we think they're worth using. This is all very like,
Yeah.
we could do this because we haven't decided yet. I'm sorry.
We could though, right? It's one of those that we do need to have a discussion around and really figure out. I wouldn't mind seeing maybe like one of the bosses in non-multi, but to take them all out of multi, I think would be a bit of a shame. Even though we are reworking them, so they're technically going to be like the same but different. So we
That's
probably
sort of
could
the
get
vibe we're
away
going
with.
for, yeah.
Yeah, we probably could get away with it, but that would then be quite a blow to the multi community, which really haven't had any content their way for probably longer than any other community in the entirety of Old School. So this could be like the point of revival, or bring in some new life at least into the multi scene, which we've also got to be cautious of. So as Kirby said, we also might not. Right. All right. Venomous RS says, can you remove the amount of players required for a high stakes LMS game to start? As it stands, you need 24 players to start a game and they never start anymore. Can you drastically lower it?
That doesn't sound particularly high stakes of you.
Also, if we did even half it, would that really make enough of a difference to make it get going again? And that's aside from like thinking, well, if there's only 12 people in a game and you have 5 friends, the odds of your friends winning the game is going to be a lot higher, which is why it's 24 right now. So it's not as easy for you to kind of rig the game, if you know what I mean. But yeah, that's my main question: is would this actually help? So I don't see that many people doing high stakes last man standing.
I don't really see what it would do apart from, as you said, help out for those that want to play a smaller amount of games or potentially launder gold. So, but I guess realistically we could. So maybe there's something to look into to make it start earlier, but there would be some considerations, as Bruno said, for the fact that teams could somewhat weight the games, and it could also be used to transfer money in a different way from trading and stuff. So yeah, okay. Nerf Rev Caves has said, will we get to see another Deadman mode along with the rerun of the finale? The last interaction was one of the best yet, aside from the finale issues.
I think that's meant to be iteration.
Interaction, yeah, probably was iteration, you're right.
I wouldn't hate doing another one. They get numbers on Twitch still, which is nice. Just depends on can we do another one that's as reinventive as the previous one was. I think would be a nice benchmark to sort of set. Mm-hmm. We have some time penciled in to try and do one, but yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and that's pretty much all we can say on it, really. It's in the roadmap for this year at least, so it's something that if we can make happen, we will. I'll just quickly add in my take. I love doing this, don't I? But
go on then.
I think if we're going to continue doing Deadman and for it to continue being a success going forward, even though there's been a considerable amount of time, energy, and effort put into the anti kind of like DDoS protection that our team have been working on, and it seems to be really, really robust. The proof will be in the pudding, I guess, in the rerun, right? But even with that in place, I think there's still so many inherent risks with running a tournament of 2,000 people online and not having them all in a LAN environment, whether that's individual connections that then could put a bad image on the event, or connections to the servers as a whole, or just technical issues. There are so many problems that could be brought up with it. I think I would prefer to, if it was a choice between like having the 1v1s stay or never having Deadman, I would rather get rid of the 1v1s so that we can still have Deadman, and then we saw the finale as something else. Whether it's this 1v1 that's just not made into a tournament live streamed event, or whether it's just some like crazy last hour that happens and it's almost like the apocalypse coming down upon Gillinor. Or maybe we look at taking like the top people that qualify. I don't know. We could split the 1v1s up to multiple 1v1 arenas and then take the top 10 people that won in those 1v1s and invite them into an in-house tournament that's hosted at Jagex, for example. Something like that probably would be better. But I would love to see Deadman continue. I think it's great. So sweet. Another question from Mr. G, and they've asked if there's been any discussion about expanding the places we can unlock the wilderness weapons. The Rev Caves is the only place you can get them, and being a 1 in 20k drop while being risky isn't the greatest. Can we spread the 3 weapons across the 3 main wilderness bosses with a better drop rate so we have more options?
To take this argument to its stupidest extension, Twisted Bow being limited to Cox is stupid. Can we have it drop from goblins? No. In terms of the drop rates, we could look at it, but I think it's probably, as it fine as it is, like 1 in 20 is kind of ridiculous. Like I just looked at it, I was like, that's only quite a lot for the 3 weapons. I mean, no, I think that is Scold. Hold on. Welcome to the best dev resource in the world, the wiki.
Thank you.
What about wilderness chest? Like a really rare drop from there.
Possibly, like I do see the wilderness weapons being as like that's kind of their charm. The really rare drops from Revenants. So I don't really know how I feel about adding it to other places, especially if it's a common drop. Because the point is, if you do really want those items, it's a bit of a grind, and that grind and those odds make it so that those items are pretty expensive. If you could just get the drops whilst you're farming out your Callisto pair or whatever, that would probably make it worth a reasonable amount less than what it is right now.
It does look like it is 20k while Scold, by the way.
Sheesh. Well,
yeah.
Okay. It's 1 in 40k if you're unskulled. Well, you know what? Yeah, they're rare, but I'm trying not to be sour this stream. I'm trying to be positive and uplifting and not have negative takes. But this one for me, I'm sorry, Mr. G, is quite literally just a case of my personal take on it is we can, but we really shouldn't. Like at the end of the day, as Obi said, similar to Cox, maybe not with the Goblin example, but it laid the foundations of getting the point across, and that is those items come from those NPCs, and if you want them, then you have to take that risk. Yeah, it's not the greatest, but that's the whole part of it, right? That's why they're there, and that's why those rewards as well have very specific niche uses within the wilderness, because if you don't want to do content within the wilderness, you don't have to get those items, and if you do want to do content in the wilderness, you don't even have to get those items, and you can still pretty much compete with the maximum rates. They're really just an extra bit of quality of life onto it. So I don't like the idea of spreading them across. It's the one charm that revs have, and if we were to remove those or put them elsewhere, then they've literally just lost their uniques. We already know how bloated that table is with rewards like alcohols and supplies. So yeah, it's a no from me. I'm sorry. I wouldn't like that. Difference being with something like the Dragon Pickaxe, because I'm sure that someone's going to counter it with like, well, that's hypocritical, is that the Dragon Pickaxe has a lot of uses that are outside of the wilderness, right? Even though technically, if you look at like statistically how long it takes you to get the Dragon Pickaxe, I'm going on a tangent here now, I'm sorry, but
you are.
I think statistically, if you look at getting the Dragon Pickaxe, the amount of hours that you spend getting it, if you're on rate, it then only saves you like a minute amount of hours on the grind towards 99 mining. And then the only other use case for it being best in slot is for one encounter in Chambers of Xeric when you're against the Guardians. And you can do that just fine with a rune pickaxe. So there's my counter for the, I feel like I have to get it. But I understand players do feel like they want to get it because it does have general uses like around Gillinor, whereas those wilderness weapons are very specific. Their bonuses only activate within the wilderness, and I think the only use case for any of them outside of the wilderness is for pure accounts as a replacement for the magic shortbow, because it's slightly higher damage output even outside of the wilderness. Otherwise it's one of those. Yeah,
To be fair,
I guess the other
dragon pickaxe
addition to the dragon pickaxe is the crystal pickaxe exists too. So
and the infernal, yeah.
like, yeah. But
It's
so that's
like-
why it's a little bit different. It's like they're same but different. Just because that has a much wider appeal. That it's one of those where it's like, right, fine, okay, we get that. We can look at making it an option elsewhere. And the last point to it, I guess, as well as the consideration, is that we've already done it for the dragon sword. We did it for the dragon harpoon, so that we made those tools accessible, especially the harpoon, to skiller accounts that wouldn't have been able to get it beforehand because it was locked behind worms from Mount Karun, right? So there is a case as well for those that don't do combat that might want to unlock it that can't. And again, because of all the other factors that have added into it, that's why we can consider it there. But for the rest of the weapons or rewards or items, for me personally, it's just a hard no.
It just feels weird. Why do the wilderness bosses have this pickaxe? It just doesn't thematically make sense to me. That's just my minor gripe as well. Like, why do these?
Well, I mean, you got to remember the wilderness
pickaxe?
bosses. They were added a long time ago, and the community was very different back then. They were added around about the same time where, you know, old school was really in its first few years.
Yeah.
And the majority of the community back then were PvPers, because a lot of the PvP community fought to bring back old school. So very different dynamic. If you look back to the previous blogs that we put out in the early years of old school, they did talk about a lot of changes to wilderness and bringing in new content. And the kind of like reception to that was overwhelmingly positive. People giving in new suggestions like, oh yeah, this would be really cool to see come from the wilderness, etc., etc. Like, players wanted to go there to get those high value rewards. So I guess looking at it, like, what would have made sense? They had the dragon two-hander, they had the dragon pickaxe, they had some new shields and that kind of stuff. Not so much the same nowadays. So I imagine that's why it was added. It was just players wanted it at the time, and now they don't.
Yeah.
So, darn those Iron Men. Just sorry, I love you, Iron Men, really. All right, so Elucio has asked what I think is probably the hottest take out of all of the questions that I've seen, period. So I'm going to answer this one last because I know that I'm about to go off. So I'll apologize in advance. But they've asked, do you think we can see a day where people can freely bring items into the wilderness and be safe? They would have to put money in a coffin or coffer to increase drop rates, skill and experience, or a barrier to entry to certain content. That way, more people will bring fully geared armor into the wilderness at the cost of what's in the coffer for PvPers to be rewarded with, instead of their equipment or the loot from their inventory. And then it finishes off saying, so we can change the wilderness into a situation where anyone can be prepared for PKing each other.
I think if you go to the wilderness, you've inadvertently signed something saying, if I die, I'm losing my stuff. I don't think we should be saving it, honestly.
Yeah, it's a hard no from me on this one, because it just feels like it's a bit too complicated. Even if we were to do it, if you kill someone and they're wearing, like, let's say, full arims, I expect to get their full arims as their skull. Even if I were to get like the cash equivalent of that, it still feels weird and not really what I'd expect. And also anything to do with like buff drop rates or better rods or anything, I'm really not for that. Just feels a bit random and not like anything we've done in the game before. So for that reason, I'm out.
It's just like Dragon's Den all of a sudden.
I guess, yeah, Q&As are kind of like Dragon's Den when they suggest things.
Yeah, they bring their pictures and we get to evaluate.
Yeah.
Alright, I'll go for the quick one. This invalidates the loot queue system I wrote. I'm out.
Also with that, yeah.
Alright, let's have the rant. Come on, give it to us.
Oh, okay. Is it my turn? All right. Okay. Oh no. I'll keep it short and sweet. First of all, I can see one positive to the suggestion here, and that is the kind of like comment around changing it so that anyone is in a situation where they can be prepared to PK another, because that's quite a common point that gets brought up, right? If you're there fighting Callisto, your gear setup is going to be completely different from someone who is then out to PK and fight you. They're going to have a way more optimal setup than you are for fighting back. So I get why I understand why you would feel like, oh, okay, actually, maybe this is a good way to combat that. But I'm just going to go back to a comment I made earlier about that whole efficiency mindset, right? Why can't you just take gear to fight back if you're in the wilderness and just accept that you've lost a few invent spaces that you would have only probably put loot in there anyway? Why don't you change your gear so that maybe you're not using what's optimal to fight that specific boss or creature, but it's good enough to get the job done and then also allow you to defend yourself? I don't like how the mindset goes towards, I need to be wearing the best gear possible for this specific situation to make it as efficient as possible, even if that includes someone coming back to attack me. I don't know, it's just that mindset. I'd love it if players could kind of like get out of it and just think about it in the bigger picture sense of things. Like, okay, I'm going into the wilderness. It's likely that I'm going to get attacked. Maybe I should accept that and not try to go with the best gear setup that has been posted on the gear Discord, for example, and instead think about bringing in switches or think about bringing in runes and maybe consider having slightly shorter trips, because you don't have as many invent spaces, but then you can fight back if you want to. And if you don't want to fight back, then just completely tank yourself up and use all of your invent spaces for food and try to go for the escape method and tanking instead. But making it so that it's completely safe to go into, the only reason that I would see that being a thing isn't because people really want to have an even playing field to fight back. It's probably because you want to go in with like the best items to make that grind as efficient as possible. And that's just not how the wilderness works. You get a lot of reward, not with the wilderness bosses currently, but you will get a lot of reward for the risk that you have there. And offsetting that by just being able to risk coins instead of your gear, I think would be a bit odd. So,
I mean, here's how you frame
Bruno?
it for the efficiency escapers. Yeah, first, Bruno, are you okay?
Yeah, I was getting blinded, so yeah, had to go show the blinds.
Alright, here's how we do it. It's very inefficient to die. It's very efficient to kill PKs, take their loot, and get the loot key that you could then cash in very quickly. Therefore, it's efficient to bring counter PK loot. What Kirby approved.
That's a great way of summing it up. But the thing is as well, is right, on a
Oh no.
people, no, this is a good thing, but people are so scared about fighting back in the wilderness, right? But I can assure you, there are so many bad PKers out there, probably even worse than I am, and I'm awful. So if you literally just bring like a pair of claws and a rune crossbow, or a dragon crossbow, with the gear that you're already taking to fight a boss, you have a pretty good chance of being able to fight back and getting a KO. Yeah, you might die and lose the loot that you have on you, but you could also snag yourself like 1, 2, 3 mil worth of PK loot. And we've made so many changes now to help fighting back. So you've got loot keys, so you don't have to worry about dropping all of your loot or being able to figure out how you fit it into your bags. We've made it so that you can't get skulled if you don't already have a skull, as long as you've got anti-skulling protection enabled. And we've made it as well so you can have a fair 1v1 when you're in singles. The only time that this isn't going to be as easy is obviously if you're in multi and you get piled on by like 10 people, you haven't got a chance. But you're in multi, so that's what happens there. So maybe in multi you just think about the tank setup instead. But everywhere else, just generally, I think people are so scared, especially in the Rev Caves. No one fights back in the Rev Caves. You just let yourselves die. Don't do that to yourself. Fight back.
Yeah, you definitely hit it bang on, because a lot of the lower end skill PKers, they're really kind of just following a script, and if you attack back, that really breaks their like PKing, not script as in botting, but like, you know, to follow the steps by steps of I teleblock this guy, I entangle him, and then I damage him until he like either dies or teleports away. So if you fight back, a lot of them are just going to be like very puzzled and confused. So you might end up just killing them out of like confusion. It's happened to me quite a few times, so honestly, give it a go.
It's so true as well, because like if you think you've got a PKer on you and all you're focused on is like running away, they are able to just deal damage to you consistently without any thought. They're just pumping damage non-stop. But if you even get like 2 or 3 hits on them, they're probably going to eat, and in the time that they're eating, they're not damaging you. So you're taking less damage than overall, as well as having a chance to kill them and have that extra loot. Yeah, it's crazy. The other take on this, one last rant, is the whole like, so going into the wilderness unprepared, this whole like, oh, I don't have gear to fight back, and I don't want to take gear to fight back because that's not the right gear that I should be taking to fight this boss. It's like going into the Theatre of Blood and not having the correct gear set up and not understanding the mechanics of the bosses and expecting to be able to just be a pro at the Theatre of Blood. You have to learn that, right? You would go into it, you would prepare yourself knowing that you're going to the Theatre of Blood, so you would know what to take, you would know what kind of people you want around you, and you would eventually get better. But when it comes to PvP, I feel like a lot of people are just too scared to take that step to actually learn. So maybe if you spent some time learning how to PvP in LMS, or maybe the PvP arena when that eventually comes out, it will put you in a better position where you feel confident to go into the wilderness prepared, to do what you want to do, but also maybe fight people if they attack you. Yeah, preparation is key, all right? Anyway, that's enough of that. We'll go into some general questions. I realize I've spoke a lot, so I'm going to be quiet now. This comes in from Elder Neo. And Elder Neo has said, new designed areas always have single path tracks that are frustrating and reduce immersion. Darkmire, Shazian, Prifdinus, Necropolis all look nice, but are awful to navigate due to a lack of gaps in the obstacles and landscape. Compare this to Mistlin, Ardoin, and older areas. Could we consider reducing the object flow in these areas and freeing up more space to run around?
I somewhat agree, but at the same time I disagree, because if you look at some of the older areas, they're really not very well designed, and some of them actually feel kind of barren. A good example of a poorly designed area is Draenor Village, where if you want to go from like the middle bit where the houses are to like say the market, you have to go all the way around, which makes no sense because you just expect to just take a shortcut in between one of the houses. And also places like Varrock, where most of like the southern bit is kind of useless aside from a couple NPCs. Whereas places like Prifdinus has things happening everywhere. As we can see in Aiza's background, it's very pretty, and it's very busy right now. And also Darkmire, while it is kind of like a one-way route, at least there's like things to do throughout the route. So you have like the Day Out Essence Mine, Hallowed Sepulchre, stuff like that. So I agree that it is kind of one-way routed, but at the same time, I don't think it's for a bad reason.
I will say something that works against Prif, because like Prif mapping is actually fairly open. It just feels really congested because there's a lot of verticality going on, so there's more stuff on your screen at once. So it just looks a lot clumsier than it actually is, which is something we could potentially design around going forwards, but it's not actually that bad mechanically.
This is probably not a good a good reason as well, but it also depends on what's in the area as well. Because say for instance you have the sawmill, for example, in Prifdinus, you don't want to change any rates, or the portal, the house portal. You don't want to change any rates. That's another thing you want to consider.
And I also think you can go the other way around, where the areas are too barren. For example, if you think about early days of Korend, it was a very big landscape, but there wasn't really much to it aside from a few activities and like favor stuff, which I think we've improved on. So now is a little bit more packed in, and obviously it's a busier area, but it's not as barren and big, which is great.
Awesome, thank you everyone. Just to check with yourselves on the stream right now, Bruno, Tide, Kirby, are you okay staying till 15:15?
Send it.
Yep.
Yeah.
We did kind of spend 50 minutes
go.
talking about PvP in a general Q&A, so I think we owe it to the people.
Well, yeah. We, aka me, and kind of... Look, I haven't been on stream in a while, okay? I had a lot to say, clearly. All
Just
right,
got to get all the thoughts out on the internet so you don't have to repeat them internally.
Yeah, that's it. All right, Fire Hazard asking the next question, and they have said, can we remove the dialogue options you added to NPC contacting the Dark Mage in the Abyss to repair pouches? Before, you could just hold a spacebar as long as you had gotten the book. Now, if you have the Colossal Pouch, and I think even without it, it has options you have to choose. I thought the point was to remove monotony.
Sure,
Alright,
it'd be nice.
I haven't actually done
Go
any
ahead.
Guardians of the Rift yet.
Yeah, well, I don't runecraft anymore because I'm done with that, thankfully. But yeah, if there's now 2 options, you have to click through them. Even though it is just holding 2 or 1 or whatever it is on your keyboard to get through it quickly, I do get that it's a bit annoying compared to what it used to be. So I'd be happy making that more streamlined compared to what it was before.
I guess it would also depend on how much space you have. I haven't exactly seen the dialogue, but maybe it's not got any space to use it. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll go to the next question for now, which comes in from a name I just redacted myself. So OSRS player has said, could Twisted Tales include favor certificates that apply to any house like Client of Corenders? Small ones would incentivize people to play the quests to avoid doing some of the favor grinds people dislike, like mining sulfite. Just delete that, honestly, it's awful. Making Shazian armor, healing soldiers, etc., and would make a great quest reward, in my opinion.
This sounds like a really nice idea. So you're helping out their citizens, so you get a little. They've gone up to their leader and said, "This guy's all right. Let him skip this."
I can't believe favor still exists in the game, to be honest with
you. Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to say. It doesn't sound like a bad idea, but at the same time, it does feel a bit weird that if you help some farmer south of the farming guild with like a bear, he'll give you some favor for. I'm guessing it would be for a specific house, so it would give it to Hasidius in this case because that makes the most sense. But even then, it's a bit random, and I don't think 5% really does that much for you. I don't think it would be the thing stopping you from doing the favor. But to be honest,
to get past the plows, Bruno, 5%. So I don't have to push them things again.
Yeah, but to be honest, I honestly wouldn't mind just getting rid of favor altogether. If we one day do a big update to Corrend again.
The epic mini-quest Architectural Alliance.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in general, just more quests in the Corrend area could potentially look at favor. It's one I would need to run by Ed, I assume. But I'm not going to say no. I hate favor.
So the favor for Architectural Alliance, you can just have like a task list that you have to complete by helping out citizens around the area instead.
True. Very true. All right, XX Dank Memes 420XX. Someone's been playing the Xbox a lot. Has asked, could the team look into improving shooting stars to encourage group participation? Current experience rates right now are fine as is, but in non-total worlds, clans and Discord communities constantly pile every star, penalizing everyone else and solo scouters.
Everyone else and solo scouters, damn. I was getting double dipped there.
So long as helping those people out doesn't make it worse, or doesn't make it much better than it is right now, so we don't end up buffing the XP rates without trying to buff the XP rates, I'll be fine. If it was something like the Motherlode Mine veins upstairs, where if you have more people, it doesn't matter, I'd be fine with that.
How would a second star work out to spread out the people?
No clue.
Just like 2 fall down?
Yeah, 2 fall down instead.
And you'd have half the people at each star.
Yeah. Less crowded, though.
What a wild suggestion, Tide. We've solved all the problems. Just add another one. I guess that could work. Either way, it looks like there are potential solutions that we can look into. So thank you for that, Dank Memes. All right, Nothing Wrong 8. There is something wrong with your comment here, but I'll let everyone else decide what that is. When can we expect endgame mainscapers to get some love again? Aside from Raids 3, which is long overdue and was announced ages ago, it's been and is going to be nothing but content for Iron Men, mid-game players, and content creators.
Ah, yes, that famous mid-game boss next.
Yeah, I totally agree with this.
My thing about it being wrong is that Tombs of Amaska is most definitely aimed at endgame players just as much as anyone else, well, more so than anyone else. It's going to be more accessible because of the invocation system in there. So, you know, mid-game and mid to late game players should be able to at least participate and get completions. But it's very much end game content aimed towards end game players with very end game rewards. So yeah, I wouldn't say exactly long overdue. We're not too far away from when we initially announced it in terms of its potential release date. It was announced ages ago, granted. But yeah, I guess aside from that, can we expect endgame mainscapers to get some love again, generally speaking? What have we got coming out in the roadmap that might help with that? I guess it really depends. What would you categorize as endgame mainscapers? Nothing wrong, 8. Maybe there's a chance that you can ask a question next week as well to kind of like go into a bit more detail, because I would argue that even Guardians of the Rift was suitable to endgame mainscapers, especially those of you that maybe didn't quite finish out getting 99 runecraft or wanted to get some extra rewards, for example. It wasn't entirely focused around them, granted. But I do think that the next big thing is going to be the Wilderness boss rework, and then Tombs of Massacre, I would say, are probably the most endgame related / suitable pieces of content coming out anytime soon. Unless anyone else has anything they can think of quickly.
From the very early initial discussions, the next Ed quest might cater to this a little bit. That's
true.
The level
they
of
don't know
spoiler
what
I'm
that
going
is
for.
yet, though, so that's pretty big. So there are things that we have, and Bruno, sorry.
Not to mention a couple of things we worked on the game jam. With that one thing with the black and blue area, that was very cool.
The Tassakal trials, definitely endgame orientated.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. I wasn't sure if that's been like announced, so I don't want to leak anything. But yeah, that looks very cool.
Well, I'm pretty sure we put it in the Gazette. If not, well, then I've just pulled the name of it.
I think so too, but I'm not going to be the one getting slack if I do happen to leak anything.
Leaked.
So it was me now, so it is what it is.
So like one time I leaked, I was going to have butt busting on stream for RuneFest by accident.
Did we? Where is it? It's hold on. Coming. Where's? Oh, I got to scroll down. It was a big Gazette, actually.
It was a big Gazette.
Oh yeah, we did. We said the Tassakal trials. Yeah. So
Okay,
that's a potential. Obviously,
that's
it's
pretty
just still a
endgame.
concept, but very much endgame, as Bruno said. All right. Another name redacted has asked if there's any ETA on when the smaller rewards will be polled for Raids 3 as per March's Gazette. Oh, well, that's probably a me question, isn't it?
That's yours, the CM here.
Soon-ish. There's no date set. We've got a couple of things that we need to get out of the way first. Number one is we've got Giants Foundry that we're going to be looking to poll soon. Then we'll probably look to do the depending on how we get with the reward feedback with PvP Arena, that may come first. If not, then it's most likely going to be the Raids 3 rewards after Giants Foundry, and then we'll move into the PvP reworked rewards. So not too long to have to wait. We actually went over them today in a meeting, and it seems pretty cool. I'm excited, and hopefully you will be too. Okay, big question. Put it on your listening ears. I'll try my best. It comes in from Raid and Stake. How does the next drop chance actually work? There has been a lot of discussion around it. Does everyone who has met the damage threshold have the same chance of getting the drop? Or does it work like this? God. You deal 400 out of 4,000 total HP to next. You have a 10% chance of getting the unique. Or does contribution percentage actually matter? Because I feel it should be the second option. You deal 10% total damage, and then you should have a 10% chance of getting a unique. We could have just left it at the first question.
Yeah. I don't know for sure, since it wasn't something I worked on. But I'd assume that it's if you do 2,000 out of the 4,000 damage, you'd have more chance to get the drop and the unique in that case, compared to someone who's done 400 out of the 4,000. And when they said 10% chance of getting the unique, that's 10% chance of getting the unique if the unique gets dropped, and not just there's a 10% chance of getting the unique.
Yeah, not yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it means 10% chance unique. 1 in 10. Let's go. I'm pretty sure we've actually gone into detail about next drop tables when we first looked at like the next rebalancing tweaks. So it might be worthwhile, Raid and Stake, just checking back on the news posts from January, because I think we put the drop rate formula in there just about 2 weeks after next was out. because the wiki already had like drop rates that had been crowdsourced. So you should be able to find the formula in there in terms of how it works. I just can't remember it off the top of my head.
Yeah. I'm not 100% on that, so
right.
sorry if I'm wrong. But I expect the wiki to have correct information since we did share it.
Wiki saving lives since 2007. All right, Mortarboat has said, how do we shift from the reliance on the Dragon Warhammer / Bando's Godsword for bosses and incorporate the magic spells for reducing attack, strength, defense as a way to kill them instead?
You make bosses that you can't melee.
We'd also need spells that are more effective as well, though.
Yeah, like this is something that Arcane has mentioned before, and the more I think about it, the more I'm starting to agree with him. Magic in the game is kind of bad in that it's just different flavor range, and it just feels really bad when you have all these spells that you could be using that have a really interesting effect, but no one does because they're all kind of garbage.
Yeah, magic is just one of those attack styles which is either this is the best thing for it, or you probably shouldn't really bother. And when it comes to comparing it to something like a Dragon Warhammer or BGS, it's almost always a shouldn't really bother because the Dragon Warhammer and BGS are so strong already.
At least the solution sounds simple. We just make it so you can't use melee.
Or maybe add like a level 90 version of stun or enfeeble or whatever. And maybe that will be useful for magic-based bosses.
Yeah, I mean that's probably the more practical way of doing it. I just like my stupid suggestion more.
Make him a bit more susceptible to the curse or whatever as well, or the magic spell.
Yeah.
Cool, sounds good. No, I'm not going to carry on. I've already spoken enough. No Halo mods. They have said the recent addition to the level 65 attack tier with the Keras Partisan is super nice and very welcome. Could we see some additional tier 65 weapons in the future?
Yes, if the content allows it. Beneath Curse Sands was sort of like that sort of like it fit in the like account progression where it's like the last sort of quest you do, and at that point you're like progressing past tier 60, so 65 just kind of feel like a nice fit for that reward. If we do sort of more content around the area, we can add more rewards to that area.
Yep. I also think it's important to note that the reason the Partisan is okay as level 65 is because its main use is like a niche item, which lets it compete with some of the level 80 weapons or whatever we have. Whereas if it was set to level 80, probably a few less people will be using those items, and it wouldn't really make sense because it's only useful at those places. So setting it to a lower level like 65 does make sense in that case.
Maybe we could bring, the Giant's Foundry has got the new sword in it that's currently 50 attack. What if that was 65?
I don't mind. Looks cool, so it'd be nice if you got good use.
Sure.
There's a post out. There's a post out at the moment, community. If you want to see the requirements for the new sword from Giant's Foundry changing, then please leave your feedback.
Subtle plug.
I think it's because like the current plan is like it was originally going to be a cosmetic. People wanted it to have stats and not be a cosmetic, but from what I've seen very firsthand at least is that now players are like, oh, this weapon doesn't have very good stats. We're probably not going to use it other than as a cosmetic. So maybe we could look at having different stats that people are like cool with, where it would fit somewhere, very similar to how the Keras Partisan did. Who knows? Right, I got time for 2 questions. I'll quickly get through these. This is give GP for my. I'm not going to say the last 2 letters, but I'll let you use your imagination.
The last letter is a P.
Play points.
Yeah. Has there been any discussion for a new higher level Slayer boss yet? Maybe a level 97 unlock?
I don't believe so. Eventually, yeah, it would be awesome to have a level 97 Slayer boss. when the time's right and where we can fit it in. But so far, I don't believe so.
We'll just figure out where the content's going to come from. Is it going to be from request, or is it just going to be standalone?
I mean, 97 Slayer, you'd hope it would be standalone.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I would
absolutely.
expect no quest if it was 97 Slayer.
All right, there we go then. And the last question that I can cover for today is from Elucio. And they have said, I love the way current meta for high-end items to dismantle Bandos/Armadillo parts for the new tier 80 armor. Do you think we can see this concept return for lower tier items to create much needed item sinks for new ones?
Probably. We just need to
Where
figure
it
out what
fits.
items. Yeah, we need to figure out what items we want, what items we want to sync. Does it thematically make sense? Does it mechanically make sense? Because I believe the current ones are just essentially upgrades for that sort of stuff. So we need to figure out, okay, how do we design this so that you are essentially dismantling item to upgrade it? Or we could mix and match components, easy for me to say. So we could combine your Bandos and Armadillo components to make some weird melee ranged hybrid armor, which I definitely just haven't designed on the spot.
Or maybe there could be just
So-
another way to remove items from the game, like a new minigame or something like that.
It's also something that we, to be honest, do pretty often, these days at least, when we introduce a new business item. For example, all of the Cerberus boots, you're going to need the previous business item to make the new business item. Same thing with Tarva in this case, with Bandos. So yeah, I imagine it's something we'll carry on doing so we don't devalue the previous business items too much.
I think there's just overall been less interest in doing it for the lower tier items because they don't really have that value. Even if we were to sync them, the value still wouldn't really hold because their use is somewhat limited. You kind of, for a relatively experienced player at least, you're going to surpass the requirements to use that gear and replace it relatively quickly. So not as many people care, but that doesn't mean that we can't look into it at least and see those options. That being said, though, we literally did propose this before with the sword from Giants Foundry being an upgrade to Obor's Club, and the players, well, that's no longer a thing. So I'd imagine that the feedback suggested that that wasn't really that welcomed for the lower tier stuff. It might be a bit of an edge case because Obor's Club's obviously gated behind keys that you need to get and obviously get the drop. But it's something that we'd need to look into a little bit more. But I like it as a concept, and I think upgrading old items is quite cool. So yeah. All right, well, that is all that we have time for. We've ran over and I need to dip because I've got to go feed the dog. So I will quickly go over the announcements one last time. First up, exclamation mark game update. This week's game update featured quality of life changes to Guardians of the Rift and Beneath Cursed Sands. You can find all the details on that in our blog, exclamation mark game update. Also, we have exclamation mark PvP Arena. Essentially, we're diving into the results of our most recent poll for the PvP Arena rewards. So take a look at our thoughts on the future of PvP and Old School and let us know what you think. Exclamation mark PvP Arena for that one. Exclamation mark Deadman mode. Essentially, in preparation for the Deadman mode Reborn rerun closed beta, we did unfortunately encounter some difficulties with save profiles that were taken during Deadman mode Reborn. We want to make sure that when players come into this closed beta, they have all of the stats and gear that they had when they were originally in the Deadman Reborn 1v1s. But due to those complications, it's been recommended that we delay the closed beta until it's been resolved. We're confident that we can fix it and that we can get it in a good place ready so that the new date will now be Friday the 13th. So it's next week, just one extra week of waiting. Really sorry about that, but really feel like it's better that we can get you in with the stats and gear that you had rather than not, because that's what we're there to test. So yeah, and then we'll have the official run after that. There won't be any more betas, I don't believe. It'll be once this one's finished, we'll then do the official rerun once more. And then lastly, exclamation mark Giants Foundry. Following your feedback, we've made some changes to Giants Foundry ahead of the poll going live. So get all of the latest, including estimated experience rates, new rewards, and a first look at some imagery from inside the actual Foundry itself with exclamation mark Giants Foundry. Kirby, Bruno, Tide, thank you so much for joining me. Do you have any closing words?
Yes. Vote yes on the next PvP Arena poll or the producer gets it.
The Nan gets in the cage.
What? That sounds like a challenge. Oh, the man's in the cage until the rewards pass. We can't say stuff like that, right? We're unbiased, unopinionated when it comes to how people should vote, all right? If you want to vote yes, then vote yes. The Nan is going to be okay, and the producer will also be okay. Ignore Kirby's empty threats.
Empty
We
threats.
definitely.
Go on, Bruno, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say we definitely love our Nans and producers, so don't worry about them. But yeah, please vote fairly, not just for your own benefit.
Wise words, Bruno. Thank you for that. Tide, anything else you want to say?
Nah, I'm pretty good right now. Except yeah, vote fairly on the next poll.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Big thanks as well to Mod Spear. Nearly got the wrong mod name then, but for helping out with the stream. Really appreciate you being here. Thank you to everyone in chat. Thank you to the members of the CM team, Light, Sani, and Goblin for helping out with moderation. Maybe as well Jagex Exo's in here too. I haven't seen the names pop through, but yeah. Have a fantastic evening, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week. Have a great weekend, and we will see you next week, where I believe we're going to be going over the Game Jam pitches one more time and talking about them in a little bit more detail, as well as being able to answer some of your questions. So, should be a good one next week. We may even do 2 streams in 1 week. Who are we? I don't know. But anyway, have a good one, and we'll see you next time. Bye.